All right, people, you know that sound. It is the Unfiltered Band means another episode of Unfiltered is coming your way right here and now. It is episode 81. It is the 7th installment in our Life Pod series, and this one is called Acceptance. Thank you for accepting me as part of your day or night, wherever you're listening. If you're on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast. Of course, you can follow and jump on board the Unfiltered Revolution at Casey Stern. And if you aren't already, when you get over to Twitter, you can get into my bio and thank you, Unfiltered Band, and see the link for my YouTube channel and jump on there as well. And of course, Believes at BLEAV, their channel, their Twitter, and everywhere else. Lots of sports coming up again here in the next few days. Obviously, after Albert Pujols' 700th. We're waiting here with Judge. We're in the pennant chases. There's a lot going on. I've got Tyler Kepner of the New York Times coming up this week. Gibby, former Jays manager John Gibbons. I got Matt Holliday back on talking about Albert Pujols, Todd Frazier this week. So I got a lot coming up here on the pod. Hopefully you're enjoying the podcast, and I appreciate you being on board. Before I get going here, and I kind of, bulleted out some of the things I wanted to hit today, and I'll give you a preview before we kind of get into them. And, I wanted to hit again, and I wrote down, why am I doing this? Not why am I having a podcast or why am I talking sports or all the things I've done the last 20 years, but why this Life Pod series? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, because I wish other people did this, and I wish I had other places, and I've been inspired by some people that I've listened to and watched here over the last couple of years, and in books that I've read, which I've talked about in these Life Pod series. But I wish over the course of my life that there were more people, and I didn't grow up with, when I was young, having social media to as much of a cesspool as it could be, lean on in certain places to, know kind of who could inspire you. But I just didn't have much of that. Most of us did not. And, even now, I'm so inspired when athletes and people that I respect in this business or just in general I'm learning about are sharing their own stories. And I think it's important. It's also therapeutic to do. Now, I've said this before in this Life Pod series, or if you're just joining us, I'll say it again. And I wish I could say it, every 5 minutes to just remind people. Please understand, this is not some preaching of like, hey, I've gone through a lot of shit, and here I am, and I'm perfect and wonderful, because neither are the case. I'm just trying to be happy, just like everybody else. Trying to have success in my life, whatever success is to you. I'm trying to build in terms of family and as a father and as a human being at this point in my life now, just a couple of weeks away from being 44. And, not have this be the end, but be the beginning in a lot of phases and chapters of my life. And a lot of people are going through that. So that's number one. The other reason is because, and I've said this before, even when I was doing radio for all of those years and talking about sports and ranting and discussing all kinds of different crazy things over the course of the years with many different co-hosts that I enjoyed being with, I was always blown away by when I would get notes that our show meant anything to somebody that was in a rough spot. There are a couple of sincerely touching scenarios that have been put in front of me about me as a host over the course of the years that I've kept and tried to remind myself of, because they're almost so humbling you don't even believe it, where people were going through illnesses and playing our show in hospitals and all sorts of things that it's like you never feel like you're ever going to resonate in that way. But I mentioned this before. Since I started doing this Life Pod series, immediately after the first one, and go back and listen to them if you haven't, I started to get notes that people would send me. And, with these kind of things, and I understand it, trust me, a lot of people do that privately, not necessarily publicly, because it's difficult to do that. Difficult to discuss things like this publicly. And I would never, and I'm not going to ever read out any of the names of anybody who would ever write me any of these notes. And I've had and created friendships with people even ever since starting this podcast 4 months ago, because I think more of this, because of these Life Pod episodes, than anything else I've done. Maybe in my career. I got one. I was thinking of doing one anyway, and I knew that acceptance is where I want to go, and I'll get to that and kind of preview this episode here in a couple seconds. But I got a note Friday, which really was touching. And if the person listening who wrote this is assume they're listening to the podcast all the time, especially I want you to know, like, I write back how humbling it is of somebody to say and how much I appreciate that. I'm just reading the note. And I think some people probably think, well, that's just something that people say. And maybe some people do, but I'm not anybody. I'm not just some people. These things are really touching for me. And in this note that was sent to me, it said that the pods are always a highlight of the day, especially your Life Pod series. It takes a lot of guts to be open and honest, and to do that every day, it makes me emotional reading it. It's helped me be a better person. You're an inspiration to me and my son. I don't want to. I don't want to be anybody's inspiration except for, hopefully as a good father for my kids, right? Just like we all want to do as parents. I'm inspired by other people all the time. But that is so humbling to hear. And if I can, in talking about my struggles or things I've gone through, have somebody else feel like they're not alone, I'll do these all the time. I mean, this is the 7th installment out of the 81 episodes I'll do. I'll do 70 more. It doesn't matter to me. That's very meaningful stuff. So that's why I'm here doing this. That's why I'm talking about these kind of things. And the funny thing is that a lot of the conversations that I have now, a lot of people reaching out and saying the same things have happened to me. And I've had people who are like, much higher Q ratings than I ever had, even when I was doing television, have reached out, a couple, in fact, and said, hey, I had no idea they had experienced anything like this, self-esteem issues or anything else, any of the things I've talked about. Today's is important because it's the hardest one. Of all the things that I've learned and all the things that I've gone through, I would be totally upfront in telling you that this is the portion that I still struggle with on a daily basis the most, and that's acceptance. Acceptance has a lot of different levels, and I wanted to cut it down this way because I wanted to really kind of get the message across, at least that I'm trying to put out today in sharing this. And I hope some of you will share stories as well. And really, just to kind of digress for a second, one of the other reasons why I do this, and I had somebody mention this, and I think it was like the Manti Te'o one I did of all of them, ironically, but somebody mentioned that it made them think about something that a friend of theirs had gone through and then wanting them to reach out. Like, that's also, like, for me, it may not be about you. You may recognize things I say and be like, holy shit, I think my loved one, my family member, my parent, my husband, my wife, whoever is going through something like that. I recognize this stuff. Today, in talking about acceptance, I want to talk about others, yourself, and your situation. And I'm going to talk about it in a couple of different ways. And then I'm going to talk about what I call in my own life pushing back and what that feels like and how difficult that is and what that means. Let's start with others. For people in this world, and I don't want to say people like me because I think everybody experiences this, the difference between people who experience this and people who don't, there is none. It's just people who tell you they experience this or you've seen them experience it and those who hide it better. Everyone experiences it. I don't care. Kevin Durant has 70,000 burner accounts, right? So there's insecurity everywhere, no matter what you do for a living. And social media has made that incredibly hard for a lot of people to deal with. And I've witnessed that myself with people comparing themselves to other people or other people's Instagrams. One of the reasons, and I'm very honest about this, I've had multiple people tell me that I should have an Instagram for this show and that I should get back on Facebook and do it for the show. And I don't plan on doing either, even though it may help me for this. I don't think I can handle it because I there's so much negativity and so much comparison to other people and so many things that I dislike in those areas that for me, Twitter is the most palatable because it is the closest to a workspace and sharing information. It's why I don't do TikTok or that stuff either. And by the way, that's probably stupid from a business standpoint, but I'm just being honest. Who I am, I'm going to say I can't handle it. I don't want to handle it. I don't want to see the negativity in front of me. I don't want to be, comparing myself or my situation or my past or my present to anybody else's. I don't want that. So I don't do it. Comparing ourselves to others is something we do now more than we've ever done in the world because of social media. It is too much thrown in front of us. How much money somebody else is making, what kind of things they're doing, what they're eating, what they're wearing, where they're living, what they're driving, people you knew in your past who have been further than you, made it further than you, whatever you think that further is. We've all experienced that, right? You think they're better looking than you, or they're smarter than you, or they're more successful than you. One of the things that we battle with always as people, that I battled with the most in my life of anything in these pods, and I've mentioned this before, is acceptance from others. As a human, as myself, I gained it pretty easily for a long period of time. Clearly, I'm, trying to rebuild all of that now, and it's a struggle. But I gained acceptance for what I did. I gained acceptance for making people laugh, or for talking about sports, or for having a take or whatever, right? Or a rant I did, or something else. But with no offense, and this is not demeaning at all any of the listeners I had over the years, of the importance of that, or those relationships and friendships, because those are real. But it was acceptance from others in my life that I had a hard time with from all the way back to 5, 6 years old. We all want to be accepted by others. We all want to be accepted and cared for and loved and wanted by other people. We do. Even if we don't want them, we want them to want us. I mean, how dumb is that? But that's how we are, right? A lot of people get into breakups and things like that, and they don't even realize, is it that I miss them, or is it the ego that, like, I just miss, like, that, how could they not want me anymore? And I've been through probably both situations where it has been them that I've missed, or that it has been that they've just not wanted me. In situations multiple times where I've been, cheated on in relationships, for example, that happens, right? We're always looking for acceptance from others. And one thing that I have gone through that I think, is a struggle that we all go through, right? Is the other part of that, and how to turn that around. One thing and look, you're going to have people who are never going to accept you for who you are. That's just, that's, by the way, acceptance of that is a further level and a different kind of acceptance. And it's another one that I'm struggling with, like everybody else is. But when you have something that happens in your life, or things that happen in your life, where people who praised you at such a high level then suddenly don't accept you at all, or put you down, or make fun of you to other people, and I've had all of the above happen to me in the last 2 years, that's really difficult, right? But going through acceptance of other people is how, to me, you get better at accepting that other people aren't always going to be seeing you the way you want. But what we can control is seeing them the way that we want to, caring enough for them that we see that they have flaws. I mentioned this before, but this is a common example of things that happen, like when you go back to when you're a teenager, right? When we see somebody that, you're in a group of friends and you're trying to be cool, and there's like that, guy or girl or whoever, and it may have been you who's on the other side, and I was bullied, so, whatever. Like, and, maybe it's you in that other side, but you're in a standpoint where you're sitting there and you're making fun of somebody else in a group because that group thinks you're cool. I had people do that to me when I was 43 years old. So that doesn't just happen as teenagers. Somebody I cared for, and anybody in the world, do that with their group of friends to me when I was 43. It happens. When you get bullied the way that I did when I was a kid, and you go through things that a lot of you have, you're never going to be able to do that. I don't know on my hand if I've ever been in situations in my whole life that's ever happened. Now, it's been presented in front of me, but that I would ever be a part of it. Because there's too much empathy. Anybody who's ever been on the other side, you just can't do that. But what we can do, and what we can control, is accepting other people with their flaws and their faults, and love them for who they are, and care for them for who they are. If you have friends and family who are struggling, and they're in trouble, and they're having a bad time period in their life, or they're ill, or they're going through a bad breakup, or they're unemployed, or whatever the case is. I mean, it could be a million things, right? Anything. They didn't get into the college they want. I'm trying to use all ages because it really not age specific. But if you have friends that are in that kind of a situation, or family members that are in that situation, the desire of most people is to get in their own internal shell and say and feel better about themselves by saying, that's not good enough. No, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with his or her bullshit. I don't want to deal with his or her problems. I don't want any part of that. Now, there are times where in my life and all of our lives, if somebody is extremely negative as a human, and we're not talking about they're sick or they're having mental health problems or whatever, going through a phase or issues, because people in their life will go through all those things, and there's a difference here. Somebody's a negative, you should never put up with just somebody who's just purely negative all the time for no reason. But you got to care enough and be empathetic to find the reason. What the hell is it? Why? Why are they this way? What's wrong? Is something wrong? Can I ask them? Can I help them? Can I think about it? Can I find out? Can I accept them for who they are and love them with their faults and their flaws? I got no problem admitting to you I'm flawed. I'm far from perfect. Far. Flawed. Sensitive. Insecure, prideful at times, stubborn at others, emotional at others. But I got a good heart and I care. So do those people who are going through their own struggles. You got to care about them and have a good heart enough to care and to be there and to sit there and take it sometimes. And I'm going to get into that sometimes. And to care enough to hang with them and say, hey, look, you don't got to pretend for me. I'm here. Pretend for those other people. Forget all that Instagram bullshit and whoever else or whatever. Again, depending upon, because I'm trying to hit not just things I've seen in my life, but there are people way cooler than me, way younger than me, live in different places, live different lives. It doesn't matter what it is. But a lot of times you could sense that those people are pretending to be better than they actually feel about themselves. And you got to sit there and tell them, hey, look, you got to understand, I'm not going anywhere. I got you. I got you. You don't know how much that people who have been through the things that a lot of us, the things that I've been through in my life, in terms of insecurity and being made fun of and put down and self-esteem and some of the betrayal and some of the abandonment and all that stuff. You don't know how much we wish somebody would have turned to us that we cared about and say, I got you. Mentioned it before. The amount of people that I've had in my life who have done that for me over the last few years that have been as hard as I wouldn't wish them on in two scenarios on anybody. I don't know if you would have asked me before how I would have gone through one of them, how I've survived both. I have no idea. And I would tell you the answer is zero, not one. Outside of my mother, nobody. That's why I'm here doing this, because I want to be there for other people, but I want other people to realize, hey, look, these are the things people don't say. What happens to people a lot, and it happened to me, is that you get so forgotten and so lost in the process of other people not caring or, putting you down or wanting to be in that crowd that makes fun of you or laughs at you instead of helping you and reaches out a hand for you, that you then end up so much holding in, that fear of asking for their help, that at the time you finally feel like you're going to self-destruct. If you don't ask for their help, now you're begging for their help. Now you're desperate for their help. And now the people didn't want to help you when you weren't desperate, even though you deserved it, they certainly ain't going to help you. Now they're running further and faster away from you. And that's the problem that happens to a lot of people who are insecure and have self-esteem issues and don't accept who they are themselves. That's the second portion of this and the bigger piece, clearly. But a lot of times when we're not accepted by others and we try, and I do think it's important in our life to make sure that to tell other people, hey, you're there for them, right? Like, that's the crazy part about what happens sometimes is that, people who have low self-esteem and have insecurity issues from childhood, right? And are that way. And you could tell, look, I've lived through this. You could tell people you care about a million times, hey, this is how I am, and this is what happens to me. And I'm being honest with you and I'm sharing with you. And if they don't care, they're going to forget in 3 seconds and only care about themselves. And literally, you just are showing them exactly what you explained like a day ago, an hour ago, and they still doing the wrong thing. There's no wrong or right, but in terms of what's best for you, because they're not thinking about you, they're only caring about themselves. But what happens in that case is that pushovers, and I've talked about this many times, and people who then are beaten up and beaten up and beaten up and beaten up constantly, and they hold it in, and I'm not good enough to stand up for myself, and I don't accept myself enough, and I've given you everything. Why don't you accept me for who I am? And all that gets in your head. Guess what? Eventually, it combusts, and now you're pushing back in the wrong way. Now you're pushing back with anger that's not real. You're saying things you don't mean. And the irony that happens in that kind of scenario with people who are like anybody who's watching or listening to this, who's like me in our lives, right? Who are like, always making people feel better, happy go lucky, and all of that. But a lot of that then centers around only caring about other people's feelings and not your own, only wanting others to know they're accepted and not accepting yourself. That eventually, when you stand up and say, no, I've had enough of this shit, I'm not taking it anymore. Do you know what they do? They blame you for everything. It is your reaction that is the only thing that matters. Everything they did to put you down, to make you feel bad, to not care about your feelings, all the things you told them about your insecurities. This is why people don't share how they feel, because everything you did to share how you feel and lay it out there in the line and give it all and do all the things that people like, empaths like me have done our whole lives, right? Even when we shouldn't. I literally, it took me, I only one time in almost 44 years have really ever stood up for myself with somebody who didn't treat me well and said I had enough. And it was the instance that really showed me that if people don't care, they're only going to see how you react. They don't even realize what they've been doing to you or how they've been treating you. Instead of being proud of myself that I stood up for myself, I actually was made to feel 1,000 times worse and punished for it. A lot of us go through that. But that's our own fault. That's not their fault. And we have to accept that too. Accepting yourself means not only accepting who you are and that you're good enough, not only accepting that you can be the best version of yourself, even if you're not, drawn up the way from a face or a picture or a body the way somebody else thinks you should be, or you're not doing the job somebody else thinks you should be, or living where you should be, or who you're with in a relationship somebody you should, or have the kind of family somebody else thinks you should, or whatever, you drive the car someone else. I mean, the religion, the political beliefs, that we can go on forever. Even if you don't have all of that, accepting that, hey, I'm going to be the best version of me and I like who I am. I'm not perfect, right? I need to, do better in my career, or I need to be better with people, or I need to lose weight, or I need to gain weight, or whatever it is that like you're working on, whatever it may be, superficial or not. And we all have superficial things too. Whatever it may be, you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, I'm going to be the best version of me. That's something I couldn't do most of my life. The only times I felt that way were when I was on top in a career that I knew I pushed for and earned myself, or when I had with my family was at the height of a time where I was like, I've made it. Like I found a person that is everything I ever asked for, kids I ever asked. I mean, I literally, it was like even going through, and I was at the time, ironically, going through unbelievable struggle. But, this is where, like, why a roller coaster goes all the way to the top before it comes down. It's at its highest point. Probably sit here being, totally honest with you. What is this, September? I mean, 2 years ago today, or around this time, I was at the height of my whole life in my own mind. Because even though career was always so important to me, from a family standpoint and everything that I was feeling and where I was and who I was with and everything. And this is in the midst of, I think we were in COVID then. Probably the height of my life for the things I care about and that are meaningful for me. But I never really accepted myself, because as soon as the acceptance from others was gone, I realized all I had left was myself, and I didn't accept that at all without being validated. And if you're not watching, you don't see the hand gestures I'm making to go like for 0, but it's like an open hand, right? And I'm here. I'm at that place. Like, people love me. I love the right people. The right people love me. I'm in a situation every day. It's like, oh my God, like, we can make the most of this and we could do the best and everything's positive and it doesn't matter that things are going wrong. And all of a sudden, when the acceptance from the others in your life that are validating you is gone, you realize that you're back to 0 because the only thing that's been hiding the whole time is that you actually never really accepted yourself at all. You didn't accept yourself without them, so then you couldn't accept yourself with them. So then you get to a point where now you're chasing and now you're standing up for yourself in the wrong ways. Now you're saying things that are overboard that you don't mean because people are hurting you, because the pain is so, when you're an empath and you get hurt and people wrong you, but people don't understand and look, and this is not like empaths are better than somebody else, but like, I've read books on this, and this is not just the last couple of years. I mean, I've known this my whole life that I'm this way. When you are that way, where you literally cannot help but feel everything everyone else feels. I mean, I feel more guilt than anyone else I know. I feel more sensitive than anyone else I know. I feel more love than anyone else I know. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. More emotion. I mean, I could laugh at anything. I could cry at anything. I mean, empaths, you just feel everything. When you're that way, all right? When you are that way as a human being and somebody hurts you, I don't mean to do the, oh, well, you don't understand pain and I understand pain, but I will tell you, when you can ask somebody who's an empath, the pain is different from a strength level than anyone can understand who's not built this way naturally. You just wouldn't understand it. Because people on the outside be like, don't you understand? Like, it doesn't matter who hurts you, work, and people you love, it like that person, or they're an idiot, or like they're wrong. And like they're showing you, like, look what they did. Look what they did this, they did that. And you're like, no, that's the worst thing I've ever heard of. But you still literally, the second you get off the phone with them, or the second you're done talking to them, you're feeling such pain that the only thing you feel like you could do is, okay, well, now I'm angry. Now I'm going to stand up for myself and I'm going to tell that person and those people, you don't understand. Like, how could you treat me this way? And they didn't care about you when you were nice to them. You think they're going to care about you when you're angry at them? They don't care about you anyway. But that's what happens. And then it's like you can't even get your cross. Like, you go back to it, and I do it times in my life, and it's like, man, like, I wish I would have said, like, I wish I would have been me in those spots and not like what I thought I was supposed to do. Because when you're in that way, the me in those spots, you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, you know what I should have done with that work, or with that husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. Sometimes it could be brother, sister, it could be parents and kids, it could be anything, right? That relationship, it's anybody, right? Friend. What I should have done in that scenario, and I live this every day now, and this is part of the acceptance of it for myself. But I live every day now the acceptance of, I got to accept the mistakes I made, and the mistake that I made, probably more than any other, the two mistakes that I've made in my life that are tough to accept, and that I have still learning to go to kind of get through it, to find resolution of. One was that I thought of myself as such a piece of shit that I allowed myself to be treated in such a terrible way. But the second one was that I couldn't take a deep breath, take a minute, take the space and the time, and then at least get my point across to those people in my life that, hey, look, I need you to understand how much you hurt me by what you did. I need you to understand that I did this for you, and then you returned here, that I said this and you said that, and that it's hard to move on from those things in your life when you care so much about human beings and they care so little about you and make you feel so worthless. And I wish I'd gotten those points across in that way, in a real way, not to be an asshole, but because maybe for some of us there would be, that apology or that resolution of, all of that. But as I said in the recent Life Pod, part of the problem that we have is that we can't be accepting it. The hardest apology to accept is the one you're never going to get. I said that before. Right? My whole life, I'm the worst at holding grudges, like the worst. I allow everything, and it's partly because I don't believe in that, and I don't want to hold on to negativity, and partly because I've been a sap and a pushover. But because I'm so bad at it, literally, I never really needed an apology. So I would be like, it's fine. Like, no problem. If people would apologize, and I appreciate that, different points in my life or different days that were bad or things that were bad. If I only need one, I'm never going to get it. It's the way it is, right? So how do you accept that? That goes to the third part, which is your situation. Pushing back in the wrong way is pushing back at those people who hurt you with the anger instead of what I should have done. And that's, taking time at points like that in my life and kind of stepping back to see where I was, and look, in some cases, not giving them the time of day because they didn't deserve it. In some cases, saying it in the right way because maybe it was therapeutic for me and I didn't care about what they thought. But what we do is we lash out in that pain and we push back the wrong way. And then in our situation that we're in, after all of the dust settles, it's like, okay, you go back to all that self-esteem, all those issues, like, I don't have a job, or I don't have a person who cares about me, or, whatever it may be in your own life, right? And you're like, what the hell am I going to do now? Like, I nowhere to validate me. I can't validate myself. I hate myself. Like, now I'm blaming myself for something that was somebody else's fault for how they treated me because of how I reacted to it, and now it's my fault, which is what people like that want you to feel. You understand? You got to understand there are certain people in the world who can't carry. They don't know what guilt is because they force themselves not to carry it. There are people walking in the world right now, as you're listening to this, that in your own lives, and I know in mine, who have done the harshest and wrong, and like you power rank like all the things that you've seen humans do or do to you that would be at the top of the list of like that's the worst thing I've ever seen done, right? And they are in this world right now and don't think they did a damn thing wrong. They literally still have no idea that they did anything to you. It's not their fault in a lot of cases because that's how they're built. That's how they grew up. That's how they were taught. And in a lot of cases, because they're not healthy mentally enough to face it. And that's the part that I've had to learn, and it's probably the part I'm most proud of over these last couple of years, but it's also been the hardest part is the acceptance of my situation and where I'm at in my life. And having to fight alone and having to crawl upstream or swim upstream, whatever you want to say, right? And you're dealing with all the stuff that's happened in my life and trying to, at the lowest point of my self-esteem, find my self-esteem. I mentioned this earlier in a live pod, but, first doing it the wrong way. I lost 53 pounds. I mean, now, I don't know if it's thankfully or not, I've gained 15 of them back. So, whatever. But, maybe that's a good sign that I've cared less to do that or bad. I don't even know. But, the wrong ways, right? Superficially and all of that. So, there's all kinds of different ways that we do it. But at the end of the day, it's like, you got to get to a point where you accept your situation because you can't move up. Like, if you're old enough, there was a game Cubert back in the 80s that I often like think of it and reference when I'm thinking of my own situation, right? So this is game Cubert, and if you never played it, the easiest way, and it's a terribly dumb game, but the easiest way to explain it is like you're lighting up one step at a time with this guy. Every time he takes a step to go up, it lights up, right? That's basically how I've now learned to look at my life. That I can't climb a mountain without taking a step. I can't get 5 steps in without taking 1, 2, 3, and 4. That if I look ahead, then all I'm doing is thinking about how far away, and then it takes me back into the track of who did it to me and why they did it and how could they not care and I love them or I did this or I worked hard and why isn't this fair? Everything's got to be in a place of I accept my situation because you can't take a step until you accept it. And that has been going back to the beginning of this conversation here in this Life Pod episode. That is the hardest thing. And I'm curious, and I'd love some of you to share your stories with this. That's the hardest struggle for anybody who's gone through any kind of, self-esteem issues or insecurity or bullying or, been treated, so badly that you're at a point where like you're breaking in half, emotionally, and I've experienced all of those things. If you've ever gone through anything like that in your life, it is really difficult mostly not to move forward because, look, we all have reasons. I've got kids, I've got pride, I've got family, I've got, goals. We've all got different, you've got your own things. Everybody's got their own stuff, but it's hard because every time you try and take that first step, you're thinking about like, how am I going to get the hell up this mountain? Why did, whoever it is in your life, put you here? And the truth is you got to accept you put you here. Your lack of belief in yourself put you here. Your lack of self-esteem put you here. Your lack of giving a shit how you were treated and letting people run over you over and over again, laughing at you, putting you down is what put you here. And what you got to do is you got to get up and get your ass up and figure out, how am I going to look in the mirror and like who I am with nothing? How am I going to like who I am when the bus is running barely and the limo way gone and not coming back? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? And that's the hardest part. And that's why, I do these things, because I'm still in that process of doing that in my career and in my life and with my family, going through unconscionable, and everybody has them, struggles of different kinds of epic proportions over the last couple of years, after COVID and everything else. And it's like, and doing it by myself alone. And it's hard. It is, of course it's hard. Shit, it's hard. But it's the hard that makes it great. But it only makes it great when you get there. And you're not going to get there unless you take it one step at a time. You got to accept how others see you. You got to accept others for who they are and show them the right way to do it. You got to accept yourself, because at the end of the day, you're only being validated by others. And you got to accept your situation. And only then can you really push back the right way and push others to be successful, and empower and push others to do better and bigger things in their life, and empower and push others that you love and care about. Look, I got no problem, admitting this. Like I've joked about it, but it's not your joke. It's, part of what happens to people like you and I is the trust disappears. Like when something happens that is so outrageous with people that you care about, that like you literally, you can't get answers. And I'm going to get that in a second, because that's part of the acceptance. You get to a point in your life, if you've had low self-esteem, if you're feeling anxious and anxiety. Look, I've talked about anxiety in the past in these pods, obviously a big part of this mental health thing. But think about how anxiety plays in, because now it's like, okay, like, why doesn't somebody care about me? Why are they doing this to me? How could they do this to me? Don't they know who I am? Don't they know how I treated them? Yada, yada, yada. And now the anxiety gets in, and now it's like you're saying that 10 times fast to yourself, and it kind of spins the wrong direction. And that's where that pushing back in the wrong direction comes, right? Actually, you get the opposite of what you want. It's hard in those moments to take a deep breath, because especially if, some people in their life have had experiences where the people who would help you take a deep breath are the ones doing it to you. That makes it impossible, because then you've always related, no, well, if I had an issue, that's who would help me get through it. Like, that's the I got, like, if your I got you don't got you, and I mean they got you, like lied to you, cheated on you, and all the other things that many of us have experienced, it's terrible. I mean, it's literally like you've been living a life of a lie, and then it makes it really, really difficult. But if you accept yourself and you learn to work on that, and it's something that I'm still working on, like on a daily basis, and it's hard, right? Like if you do that, then you get to a point where you're okay with who you are. You're okay, being by yourself. You're okay if somebody's not validating you. You're okay if somebody's not, making you reminded that you're great. And look, I've done all the wrong things in my life when those things have happened that many of you had. The things that people don't want to, admit, right? The things people don't want to talk about and admit. What do you do when, like, all of a sudden, people you are making fun of you because your weight and your self-esteem, and you remember those people, then you lose weight and you get in better shape, and then what? Then you're having one-night stands, or you're trying to, like, have trophy boyfriends, girlfriends, whoever, right? And like you're making you feel better, and that's wrong and the wrong reason. Or somebody hurts you, I'll go hurt them and find other people. Like all these stupid things, we've all done them, right? Well, work doesn't care about me, and these people don't care about you. I'll go somewhere else, and then you go somewhere else, and then you're miserable, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're miserable with the people, and you're blaming them because you didn't care. All that. Everybody been there. Everybody been there. This is why this is not everybody. I don't care if you had everybody been there. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing this life pods, because if somebody didn't have a self-esteem issue, they probably have anxiety. If they didn't have anxiety, they probably insecure. If they probably or they're not admitting it, and they got to realize that, hey. And the most important part of this is, again, caring about other people going through things. I mean, that's the craziest part about, like, for me, and it's the saddest part, right? I've always been a very accepting person, and maybe overly accepting in how people treated me, but very, very accepting of other people. I've never A lot of people say they never run away from a fight. I have. I have. Some I shouldn't have. I have. But I've never run away from somebody I cared about because they weren't okay. Friend, family member, coworker, loved one, any kind, ever. Never. I never would, ever, because I understand it. That when you watch people that you care about not realizing in the mirror that they're not okay, and then because you're telling them the truth and not lying to them, they want nothing to do with you. It makes you never want to go empower other people again, but we got to do it because people aren't doing it for you. The only way to change it is to show them the right way to do it and to care. And to not care about bitter bullshit like, making fun of people or revenge on somebody who did something to you. All that stuff is garbage. Garbage. People who do that, they're just miserable. They'll never accept responsibility for anything. Accepting responsibility is, hey, how did I get here? Like, what did I do? And how did I care so little about myself? And how should I have handled it? And what can I do the next time? Because circling back to 3-4 minutes ago, my point was, I'll be honest, I don't know if I'll ever trust anybody at a high level ever again. Ever. May not. May not. I don't know the answer to that. I've been at times in my life where I thought like never again, like in terms of relationships, and then that happened. I found somebody different, so it's like, okay, maybe this is just something we all say, but probably never. I don't know. It's hard. It's difficult to do because when you let yourself out there and open, and you have self-esteem issues, and somebody exploits that, you go back to like it's like the fetal position, like in your life. So you got to accept your situation. You got to accept who you are. And that's what I've been doing. And look, it hasn't made my situation better by doing that, but it's made me feel better by doing that. And then that is, you got to stay positive. It enables you to look, for me personally, getting back into sports the last 4 months and having such a great time doing these podcasts and working on opportunities and pushing. I mean, I'm hustling like, and basically back to the drawing board, doing it all over again like I did 20 years ago. And it's hard and it's scary as hell. I mean, I didn't have responsibilities or kids then. I didn't have any of that. It's like, okay, like if I'm the failure, like nobody thought I was going to get in this business. I had an agent tell me, I've told this story before on the air, but I don't think I have it in the podcast. Maybe I haven't. But I had an agent from a prominent agency write me and tell me like I should try and think about doing something else when I sent them tapes before I ever started in this business. But at that time, it was like, oh, I'll show you. Like, wait till I shove this up your ass. Like, was how I was thinking, right? But I didn't have kids. I didn't have responsibilities of like, where am I going to live? How am I going to live? What am I going to do? What am I going to, future and college and all these different things. I didn't have any of that. It was easy, right? Not easy now. Now there's a lot more pressure on it. But I feel better because I've accepted what has happened to me, what I've allowed, and the part I took in it at every point in my life. I mean, I've done more soul searching in the last year and a half than I did in the 42 some odd years probably before that combined. And I'm not going to sit here and overly, placate you with bullshit that everything is my fault. There's a lot of shit that happened to me that wasn't fair. It's a lot of shit that I've seen that is cruelty to an inhumane level to people that you care about. But no apologies are coming. Nobody gives a shit, and you got to move on. That's harder to do than just saying it. And if you live life like I lived, every point in your life, and I don't care, it's like my parents were divorced when I'm 8, like all the way, every time that anything's happened, it's like, people just say, oh, you just got to get over it or just move on. Like, you do it then. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, they were talking about like the commissioner, Rob Manfred, the players don't want to play. Well, you play then. Like, it's the same shit, right? And people say this all the time, but it's like, I laugh because it's not that easy. And especially if you got no self-esteem and you're insecure and you're an anxious human in general, and you're beating yourself up, you getting off that mat. I mean, you're dragging around for a long time. You need people to empower you, and that's, to me, what we need to do. We need to empower people and accept them for who they are. We need to love them for who they are. We need to tell them that it's okay. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people in my life that I care for that, like, they probably don't even realize that there have been like 100,000 different instances where they'll say, I'm sorry I did this. And I'll say, it's not a big deal. No, really, like, it's not. You didn't do anything. And I don't even think they understand. Or they're worried about things they shouldn't worry about because they don't like who they are and they don't care about themselves. And I've been there too. The only difference is that I'll never, ever, ever allow anybody in my life, in my family or my kids, to ever be okay with leaving those people at the door on the curb, because you got to care for them. You care for them. If you care for someone, you love someone, that's family. Family, look, he said it before, family and friends and all that stuff and love. And like we all, there are these bullshit, and I love quotes, right? And I put out ones that I care about, right? The biggest thing in the world for anybody to understand, and that family and loyalty and all that stuff, that's not in the last name. That's not in blood. That's in people that care about you. That's in people that show you that they care. That's in people who want to lift you up and grab your hand when you're down, when you're giving them nothing, when you got nothing left to give. That's what you want. Give that to other people. Accept other people that way, even if it's not going to happen to you. That's something that, to me, is I think so important for all of us to share with other people, is the pushback being the push with a positive to empower other people. It's why I'm doing these podcasts, why I am on the side working on different things right now, actually, that I'm trying to get involved in. I wasn't joking when I said this is going to be my life now. I mean, I'm going to be a sports guy, hopefully, and successful again, to be able to provide the future that my kids, deserve. But the success for me that I'll feel outside of my kids and family and life is going to come from this. It's going to come from helping people. It's going to come from saying, hey, look, I'm not afraid to tell you, I've been through shit. I felt like shit. I've because of that, treated people at times like shit. I've done all of that. I'm a human being. I'm flawed. But I am trying on every day to get better with who I am in the mirror, and that's all we can ask for anybody to do. Share your stories, accept who you are, be proud of who you are. And I'm proud to have you part of the podcast. We've got Tyler Kepner coming up this week, John Gibbons, former manager of the Jays, Todd Frazier, my dude, Matt Holliday on Pujols' 700th. Lots more coming up. Episode 81 is in the books. Please jump in, get in the YouTube comments or the DM or any way you want to send me a note, or for people I know have one or two do this also. You text me and share stories and get back and forth. Shit, I don't know anything more than any of you people do, all right? I don't. But I do know this, that if I can have some kind of a voice that somebody is going to think that it's inspiring, or that it helps them in some way, that, hey, look, if I'm honest about my flaws and my own feelings and my own shit, then I'm going to do it. Because that's what's meaningful, not my take on whether or not Apple TV should have had the Yankee game the other night, and they shouldn't have. I'll see you soon here on Unfiltered. Be well.